Thanks for joining yet another Prime Barrel virtual tasting. This one is going to be a little different, and I'm excited for it. Normally we try different bourbons, we try different ryes, we try bespoke blends, or we make bespoke blends, I should say. This is going to be a departure from that. So today we're going to be tasting a bunch of blended scotches, beautiful scotches, but you'll be a judge of that. If you're not familiar with the Compass Box, I'm not going to steal the thunder of the ambassador, and he'll tell you all about it. But suffice it to say, it's one of the premier blenders in the world, especially when it comes to scotches and things that are not bourbon or rye. We've been kind of, if you look at our membership as a continuum, right, as your kind of journey through the palette, so to speak, we started with the single barrel expressions, and then we kind of started venturing out in the world of blends. And we had people like Found North that kind of explained to everyone and kind of broke through this stigma of blended stuff being bad, right? So they kind of explained the method behind their madness, and gotten some royal fans out of it. And then we did, which one I'm thinking about recently with the blending thing. Barrelcraft, right? So we just did Barrelcraft a couple of weeks ago, and they're also a premier blending house, but here in States. So with that being said, that kind of lends a perfect next step to a world of scotches. And this is, if you ever wanted to get into it, this is perhaps the best way to do it, because as you're going to learn later on today, most of these things are going to be finished that previously housed bourbon at some point. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Mark, Compass Box Ambassador. Hey, Mark, it's all you.
Great. Thank you very much, Michael. Welcome, everybody. Happy Saturday evening. We will be raising our glass very, very shortly. This is going to be a very, as Michael alluded to, a very informal gathering. If there's any questions that need to be asked, please raise your hand. I'll go through a little bit about Compass Box as a whole, and then I will walk through all the expressions that were in the kits that you guys purchased. And then, like you said, you can ask questions. We're not reinventing the wheel. We're Scotch whiskey house. We're Scotch whiskey makers, but we just do it in a very interesting way. So this is kind of our world. You all have a sample of everything that's on the screen, with the exception of Artist Blend, which is the whiskey that's all the way to the far right, the second to last whiskey. I'll briefly, kind of talk about both Artist and Glasgow Blend when we taste Glasgow Blend. But this is our core lineup of portfolio. So this is John Glaser. So John Glaser is an American. Compass Box is an American company, even though we were established and created in the UK. John is one of the foremost blenders in our generation. A little bit about John is he was born in Minneapolis, Minnesota. He went to college in Ohio, undergrad and grad. Once he graduated grad school, he went to work for a wine company called Shefflin Somerset. And John is a very passionate wine maker, wine lover. He loves the art of blending wines. He loves all styles of wines, old, new world. And that was his passion. He got into that world with Shefflin. When Diageo purchased Shefflin, John was very interested in the blending of the Johnnie Walker brands. So he kind of segued from blending the wine blending side of the business over to the blending Scotch whiskey side of the business. He rose the ranks rather quickly. They moved him to London, where he was in charge of the marketing campaign for the Johnnie Walker line. And this is in the early 90s. John noticed a common denominator when he was traveling to visit all the distilleries and the whiskey makers throughout Scotland that Johnnie Walker used in their expressions. He noticed a lot of great whiskeys that were not being used in the Johnnie Walker blends. So he had an epiphany. He's like, why don't we take all these wonderful casks of whiskeys, single malt, single grain whiskeys, we'll blend them together in a very creative way. I will lead the blending process. We'll call them creative names, have vibrant labels that kind of jump and speak to consumers. And I will do an American style profile line of blended whiskeys that Americans can really understand and gravitate towards. Diageo said, that's an amazing idea, but we're not going to mess with mothership. John said, well, would I be able to sign a long-term evergreen contract with you all and your distilleries that you partner with and you trade with, and make my own line of whiskeys and do my own projects? And they said yes. So in 2000, Compass Box was born. So we actually celebrated our 23rd anniversary on Monday. Last Monday, October 23rd, was our 23rd birthday. So that's really exciting for us. We're probably the oldest company that most people have not heard from or heard of. So we're like the little engine that could in the whiskey world. In short, our brief kind of core philosophies are very simple. John was one of the first original blenders, meaning we didn't own a distillery. We didn't own any stocks of whiskeys ourselves. We purchased everything from distilleries of all types in all the regions of Scotland, and we warehoused them outside of Edinburgh. And we had a blending room in West London in Chiswick. And we are moving from that Chiswick blending room currently to Richmond, which is a few stops west in London, the city of London. There is where all the magic happens. This is where John tastes all these different distilleries. We have access to about 23 different distilleries throughout Scotland. And they are whiskeys that are aged. They're mostly single malts and single grain whiskeys. Actually, they're all single malt, single grain whiskeys. And John just picks and chooses the distilleries that he really, truly loves and enjoys. And he finishes them in different casks of his choice. So blending is our platform for creativity. Like I said, he's one of the original blenders. He was good friends with Dave Perkins of High West. He was friends with other distillers out there. So he kind of set paved the way for High West, Whistlepig, Barrel Bourbon, Jefferson, a lot of bourbon, independent bourbon producers that were sourcing whiskeys. Same concept that John did, but John just did it from a Scotch whiskey perspective. We are not a single malt company. We do use all single malt whiskeys, but we don't put an age on our bottles. John was adamant about making blended Scotch whiskey, blended malt whiskey, blended grain whiskey that is of the utmost caliber and deep, complex flavor profile. He wanted to bring back blending of yesterday, when blended Scotch whiskeys were the king, where they were wonderful. They had great ingredients, lovely ages, etc., and so forth. 3 good oak rules. John is a huge proponent of up to 70% of your flavor comes from mature stocks of whiskeys that are aged in lovely casks. We use new American oak from Independence Dave out of Missouri, and we use refill bourbon casks from Buffalo Trace, Angel's Envy, and Elijah Craig. We use new French oak, and we use sherry and red wine casks from Spain. Those are predominantly our sources. 4, we do not chill filter, and we do not add anything to our whiskeys. They come out of the barrel the way that they were aged. Why would you want to chill filter and take away all those lovely essential oils that you get from the aging process? And we do not add any caramel coloring or coloring of any sorts to get a certain look or feel of our whiskeys. And 5, we promote drinking whiskey as you would wish. I have my little whiskey glass here. I'll be drinking everything probably neat, and then I'll maybe add a little water. Our whiskeys are made to enjoy any way possible, but John really enjoys drink it however you feel the best. All right, so here's our lineup. Artist Blend, it was not in the kits, so I will talk about Artist Blend while we're talking about Glasgow Blend. So Artist and Glasgow Blend were created in the Artist Blend was first created in 2013-ish, and Glasgow Blend was created a few years later. And what John wanted to do, these 2 blended Scotch whiskeys were made in mind for bartenders with bartenders in mind. John wanted to bring back the art of blending from how it was many, many decades ago. The utmost highest quality distilleries, interesting cask finished, 86 plus ABV, so they can stand up to citrus modifiers, bitters, if you will. So he really was the first to make exceptionally high grade level of blended Scotch whiskeys. The world that we swim in is with the big commercial blended Scotch whiskey producers. For example, Artist Blend is in the world of Johnny Red, Chivas, Dewar's, J&B. Glasgow Blend is in the world of Johnny Walker Black. And John really wanted to go up against these commercial whiskeys because he knew that he can create something that was much more interesting and reside with the consumer, the account bartender, of what a wonderful blended Scotch whiskey should taste like and what was missing from the market. So Glasgow Blend was created to be a gateway to peat and smoke. So if you've ported your Glasgow Blend in all your in your glasses, you're going to get immediately a subtle, lovely, peaty, smoky nose and aroma. So what makes Glasgow different from the commercial blended Scotch whiskeys is John is using roughly 10 and 12-year-old age whiskey. So the malt in this is around 10. The grain is around 12. The grain is typically Cameron Bridge. We also have access to Port Dundas, North British. But this is Cameron Bridge. We use a very high level of malt whiskey. We use about 65% malt. To put that in perspective, the Johnny Blacks of the world are probably in the 30, 33, 35% malt. So we are much higher than that. We are 86 proof, where those are 80 proof. And the peated whiskey component that we use in Glasgow Blend is Laphroaig 10-year. So it's 18% of it, of the malt whiskey is Laphroaig, so it doesn't overwhelm the whiskey. And one final note, which is really important, is the color. We age Glasgow Blend in sherry, Oloroso sherry butts. So that sherry really complements the peaty smokiness of the Glasgow. So you get, of the Laphroaig. So you get a lovely, bold, sherried, peat and smoke Scotch whiskey, blended Scotch whiskey, that is not only is delicious on its own, but it really is wonderful in cocktails. Think smoky old fashions, think penicillins, highballs, a smoky highball. You can modify it in any sort of classic cocktail or make your own cocktails. The response that we've had on this is so outrageously lovely and wonderful that we are extremely popular in the on-premise trade. A lot of bartenders appreciate Glasgow Blend because it's exactly that. It's a gateway to the peat and smoky world. As you know, peaty and smoky scotches can be overpowering. They are an acquired taste, an acquired profile. I always joke, peaty and smoky whiskeys are similar to like cilantro and food. Either you like them or you don't like them. We've all had our peaty, smoky Scotch whiskey experience. And without being educated on the category, only 10% of all Scotch whiskey made is peaty and smoky. That's it. So that means there's 90% of the Scotch category is non-peaty and smoky. But it's such an overpowering and acquired profile and taste that it kind of, everybody has that Scotch whiskey story. I come across this week in and week out. Do you like Scotch whiskey, Mr. A, Mr. Person, Mrs. Person? No, I'm not really a Scotch whiskey lover. Why? I can't handle the peat and smoke. Well, that's probably because you've had a bad experience with it, but let me show you some expressions that have no peat and smoke, and that's how you get people across. So Glasgow Blend takeaways are sherried, smoky, bold. Laphroaig 10-year-old, 10 and 12 years old are the age of the whiskeys. Sherry, Oloroso sherry finished in 86 proof. So super high quality. This is what Scotch whiskey blending was like decades ago, and John has brought it back. Any
Mark, who's your target audience and who's your target market?
For which expression? For this one or in general?
But in general.
So that's a great question, Michael. So we call them in the Scotch whiskey world, or not even in the spirits world, and in the whiskey portion of that spirits world, we have the adorers and the admirers locked up. Those are probably 10% of the world. Those are the people that appreciate high quality, really wonderful whiskey and Scotch whiskey companies, expressions. They appreciate what the blending component, the blending aspect. But outside of that 10%, we call them the availables. So those 10% are whiskey enthusiasts, people that collect whiskey. They drink whiskey on a social, whiskey clubs, connoisseurs. But then outside of that, we call the availables. And that is where we're trying to target fiercely in the near future. On a sidebar, Compass Box, we do have a kind of a new breath of leadership. So May of 22, Compass Box was sold. John Glazer still owns a minority stake, and he focuses strictly on whiskey making and consumer facing events. We have new leadership, CEO, CMO, CFO, operations, and our message and our mission is to grow our tribe, if you will. So we're spending a ton of money in social media. We're spending a ton of money on like the top 8 to 10 markets in the US. We all know who they are. And we're really kind of like a ripple in a pond expanding from there. I've had the privilege of hiring 7 new people last year, state managers, regional managers, marketing people to help grow our tribe. So the word is out. We are growing, and we're able to do things like this that we were never able to do before. So hopefully that answers your question, Michael. So we have the kind of tip of the iceberg. We just need to get the iceberg that's under the water. That's our next mission.
Got it. I do want to address a couple of things you just said before I move on. So, and they're not in any particular order. You said that Glasgow blend, because of its peatiness, or slight peatiness, can be for everybody, right? It's people. It's an acquired taste, and I equate it to an umbrella finishes in bourbon world. There are almost omnipresent. They're everywhere now, but it's very much like the peated whiskey. You either like it or you don't like it. It's very polarizing. And with peated scotches, it's definitely an acquired taste. I would say as you move through your whiskey drinking continue, right? You'll get to the point where you want to try something different. And that's when people start venturing out into Amburana finishes. That's when people start venturing out into peated scotches. And a lot of people that do like it stay loyal fans forever. And there are different levels of peatness too, like just depending on the brand. So that's one thing I wanted to say. Other things, and I'm monitoring the chat as well. People asked in which order we will be drinking it. So for the guys that missed it, you have basically 2 small packs and then 2 separate samples. Right now we are on the blenders collection. So what I would suggest, pour them out into your Glencairns, into your glasses. We're going to start with the Glasgow blend. Mark just talked about it. Next one is going to be, which one is going to be next, Mark? Orchard?
Hedonism, our birthday whiskey.
Okay, Hedonism. All right.
And then we'll do Orchard House after that.
All right, cool. And then the last thing I'll say, people are commenting on how well these kits are put together, which I will say, one of the things that attracted me to your brand to begin with is the packaging and the labeling. And it not just in these kits, like full bottles, the actual labels are a work of art as far as I'm concerned. And I know the agency who's behind it, they're known for that stuff. And so I always appreciate the aesthetic. If aesthetic matches the quality of the whiskey, which in your case, it definitely does. So I'll stop here.
Wonderful. Great. So before we move on to hedonism, I'll just quickly talk about Artist Blend, which we don't have a sample, but I'm sure you're going to be interested in it because it's in all of our advertising. So Artist Blend is kind of the yin of Glasgow Blend's yang. Artist Blend is a very polar opposite profile. It's fruity, creamy, citrusy, vanilla, rich. It's still 10 and 12 years old. It's still 86 proof, but we are aging Artist Blend whiskeys in ex-Buffalo Trace casks. So you get that very Americanized palette of vanilla, cream, citrus. So it's absolutely spectacular. I highly recommend if anybody has not tried it, to try it next time you're out, or if you see it. If you like that kind of a creaminess, citrusiness, it's not your traditional Scotch whiskey, blended Scotch whiskey. It's a more Americanized palette version of Scotch whiskey. And that's another thing John wanted to do. He wanted to bring the American profile and case bud over to the Scotch whiskey side. He knows that there's sweeter profiles in the US, and he wanted to introduce whiskeys to the American public. And his way of doing that was making Scotch whiskey a little sweeter, a little more Americanized. So I'm going to pour this for myself because this is our birthday whiskey. What I mean by that is Monday, the 23rd of October, was our 23rd birthday. And Hedonism was the first whiskey that we launched in 2000. So I want to thank you all for taking Saturday night off and for about an hour or so and drinking with us. So Hedonism is really special to us because not only was she our firstborn, John out of the gate wanted to make an impact and a name for himself. So he wanted to think completely outside the box. And if anybody's ever met John or have heard of John, he is a maverick. He likes to be different. He likes to be completely unique. And the innovation awards he's won over the course of his career, this one being one of them, really drives that home. So hedonism, or hedonism, if you want to say it Americanized, was created in 2000. And John wanted to bring something that was never done to the US. John took 3 compositions of grain whiskey, single grain whiskey, blended them together to create the first blended grain whiskey offering to the US. And I know that's hard to believe because whiskey from Scotland, for the first time coming to the US in a certain caliber in 2000, how is that possible? It was. Nobody exported from Scotland to the US a blended grain whiskey until John did in 2000. So he loves to keep hedonism at around 20. He calls it his late teenage, early 20s. What that means is we batch hedonism every 18 months, 2 years. And on the back of the bottle is a batch code. And then you can access all of our whiskeys on our website. Click on the whiskey of choice. There's always a fact sheet that you can click on, and it'll give you a complete transparency campaign on the whiskey. It tells you the age, the distilleries, the cask finishings. So we're very, very transparent. We've been that way from day one. The Scotch Whisky Society is not a fan of that because for obvious reasons, but John was adamant about his integrity. If he's going to draw consumers to trust him on what he's making, he felt it was very important that the consumers understand what they're drinking. So he is very transparent.
I've said it many times on these calls, and people know this already about me, but I came to bourbon and rye through Scotch. Like Scotch was always a first love for me. And but right now, like just by the nature of what we do, most of the time I spend it with bourbon and rye. But going back to Compass Box, and especially to all of these wonderful expressions, like that kind of just reminds me what got me into whiskey in the first place. The Glasgow blend for me is interesting in that, yes, it's a little peaty on the nose. It's a bit smoky, right? But it's not overpowering in any way. I get green apples on the nose. I also get them on the palate as well. What's interesting about this expression for me is the finish. As it goes down your palate, the throat, that hint of smoke kind of comes through, and it just a touch of it, so that you know it's there, but it's not overpowering. At least that's what I'm picking up. Anybody else has any tasting notes?
I just think the sherry component of that is a beautiful balance with the light peatiness with that.
And that's exactly what John wanted to get across. He wanted to create something that didn't overwhelm. He wanted to educate and draw in. And this is the perfect draw in. If you're trying to teach someone how to appreciate red wine, you're never going to start them with a full Cabernet. You're going to start them with a Grenache, a Pinot Noir, a Sangiovese, and work your way up. And that's kind of the model of Glasgow.
And then as we progress to hedonism, you also have a bespoke hedonism expression, do you not? Because I've seen, and it's always got me when I just gotten into Scotch, like there are 2 expressions, but there's very big disparity in price depending on which one you were looking at.
Yeah, so we do a limited edition series. So we have Artist and Glasgow blend, which are blended Scotch whiskeys. We have here Hedonism, which is our blended grain at a lovely age, which I'll walk you through in a second. And then we have our malt collection, which are all single malts, but different cask finishings. Then 3-4 times a year, we'll do limited editions. And these limited editions are one and done, meaning they're very special stocks of whiskey that John has been saving for many years. The brief and the whiskey kind of complement each other. In other words, the name and the imagery kind of speak about the heritage of the whiskey and what John has in mind. And those are all typically a lot older and really interesting and very special because there's not many. The US will get 250 6-packs up to 600 6-packs, and that's it. So their hedonism, over the course of 23 years, we've had about 5 limited hedonism edition, bespoke hedonism editions from the Muse, Quindecimus, Maximus, and Felicitas. So these are all different, and they're typically celebrating a 10-year, 15-year, 20-year anniversary, and so on and so forth. They're usually marking a nice occasion for us. So I will tease that next year, 2024, we are going to introduce another hedonism special anniversary release. So keep a lookout for that in the early part of 2024.
Okay, so just a few months away.
Yeah, so back to hedonism. So hedonism was created as the first blended grain whiskey. John won a innovator award for this because it was never done before. And he wanted to keep it around late teenage, early 20 years. So this is all grain whiskey that's blended together. And the average age is around 18 to 21 years old, depending on the batch. This particular batch, I believe, is around 20, 21 years old. And he's using Cameron Bridge, Port Dundas, North British. And those are the 3 of the 7 grain distilleries throughout Scotland that John has access to. Keep in mind, John has access to whiskeys owned by Diageo, Bacardi, William Grant, Beam Centauri, a little bit of independent bottlers out there. So he has access to some amazing, wonderful whiskeys that nobody in the world does. So he's doing things that no one else can do, period, because nobody else is giving anybody access to the breadth and the stable of whiskeys that John has access to. So John equates it to what he does is like a painter that has a rainbow of colors. He's painting all the different colors under the rainbow. That's his blending canvas. Whereas single malt whiskey is very linear, black, gray, white. Delicious in its own regard, but it's very one-dimensional. It's whiskey from one distillery, from one terroir, where John is using different distilleries, different regions throughout Scotland, and making them harmonize and come together, which is really challenging. Anybody have no notes on hedonism? Very bourbon-esque. So John wanted to make a whiskey, his first whiskey, to be, hey, America, Scotch whiskey is not frightening. Come on over to Scotch whiskey. I'll make you a whiskey that tastes like a bourbon. This is very caramel, creme brulee, coconut, vanilla, oak. Come on over.
I never would have guessed this was a Scotch. I mean, very right at the end, there's like just a touch of smokiness, but this is, it's light, nice.
There's no smoke whatsoever, Ken. So that smoke that you're picking up could be from the residual from the glass in Glasgow, or some people have different tape spuds that shine through. I almost get an aged Aperol rum finish to that, which doesn't necessarily speak smoke to me, but it could speak some sort of green, rich chocolate, green apple that, or tobacco or chocolate that could give the illusion of. But there is zero smoke, peated whiskey or smoky whiskey in this. It's all non-peated.
I'm trying to do the water and the cracker, try to keep clean in between. So
yeah,
so
it's
nice. That's surprising.
These images on the screen, the pepper romano cheese, chocolates go fantastically well with all these whiskeys. John, in addition to wanting to Americanize his Scotch whiskeys to the American palate, he wanted to make them all very food forward and friendly.
Very much like wine.
Very much like wine.
What would it be like if it was higher proof?
Yeah.
We're gonna get to that, Chris.
Yeah, some of the limited editions that we make are higher proof, and that is what makes them special. So the one that's coming out next year is higher proof. I think it's 49.
Yeah, keep in mind, what we're drinking now is considered to be core expressions of the brand, right? And so they're kind of geared towards the populace. And if you think about it from that standpoint, you can't have cask strength expressions to be adopted at the same rate as, you know, more of a 43 ABV whiskeys, which is par for the course for any brand, really, if you think about it. So this is why we're tasting it at 43. Now, I understand this is a group that likes their whiskeys to have some oomph, and I'm totally with you, Chris. Like, I would love to see this in a bit more of an ABV statement, but it's good as is. I can tell you this much: as I'm drinking it, what I've noticed is it has pretty long legs. Like, I wouldn't necessarily say that as it's not as viscous on my palate, but in the glass, it has long legs for me. And then looking at the Chad, people are saying, it tastes like coconut cream. Who said that? I think it was Jesse. Yeah.
It reminds me of a Glenfiddich 15.
Excuse me. Yeah, I get a lot of creme brulee. I get that creme brulee. I get that caramel, that coconut. Yeah.
I'd go Italian cream cake on it. I get all that pastry note to it. Like, it's really nice.
And it goes so wonderfully well as a digestif after a nice meal with dessert or a cheese plate and your coffee. It goes phenomenally well with coffee, espresso. It does not get lost. It complements. It's really lovely.
To me, what's missing from this, and I hate to be critical, but to me personally, what's missing from this is a finish. Like, it's almost non-existent for me. It kind of dies out. It does exist, but it exists on the roof of my mouth, not so much in the throat, right?
Yep.
So, but that's the nature of a 43 ABV whiskey. I mean, you probably wouldn't even expect that to happen. So, but other than that, it's great. And it's, the word that we use a lot here, crushable. Like, it's totally crushable.
Crushable. Yeah. Awesome. Great. All right. Anything else before I move on to Orchard House?
I mentioned this in the chat up above a little bit, but I've introduced several people into Scotch, several of my bourbon friends into Scotch with this exact bottle. Because many of them think Scotch, they think Peat, and I mean this is what a lot of what Scotch is, and certainly what it can be, and it's a great introduction, I think, into some and also very advanced aged at the same time, right? I mean, what you can get here with a 20-year-old Scotch as opposed to what you can get on the shelf sometimes and at the price point is really awesome.
Yeah, it's a no-brainer at the price point. Yeah, I'll say this too. I kind of have an ulterior motive for us tasting for Compass Box and for other scotches. Like, if you venture outside, and again, think of it as what we do as a club, right? Single barrels and whatnot, and bespoke blends. There is a whole world awaits outside of bourbon and rye. Like, you can do a lot with single barrels of Scotch or bespoke blends of Scotch, and that would include actually going over there to Scotland on like a lifetime opportunity trip to do this in person. But obviously, before we get there, people need to develop appetite for it, and so like I'm kind of glad that we're doing this. And this is like Jesse said, this is a perfect introduction into the world of scotches.
It is well done. And once again, I apologize you don't have this to sample, but Artist Blend and Glasgow Blend are the two largest recruitment tools we have to get people from bourbon world over to Scotch world. We've had a Hedonism. Artist Blend is a baby Hedonism. It's not as creamy and bourbon-esque, but it's very similar and close on a lower level. It's not your typical Scotch whiskey. It has that Buffalo Trace cask finishing, really brings off those vanilla, creamy, citrusy tones. So, all right. So now we're going to move on to Orchard House. Orchard House is really cool because, once again, John, in his wine wisdom, always wanted to make a kick-ass kind of like Sancerre, Sauvignon Blanc, Pouilly Fumé style white wine that had a Japanese kind of whiskey vibe to it. he was really interested in those styles. So Orchard House is the first whiskey that John had procured new make spirit from Linkwood and Kleinleash many, many, many years ago, and has been aging it in his new American oak barrels. So it came to age 2 years ago, and John released Orchard House, and he wanted the brief on Stranger and Stranger, our design company that does all of our labels and all of our not marketing, but all of our label design, was I want to speak to all the masses, and I want everybody to know essentially what they're going to get when they drink Orchard House. And sure enough, this whiskey is a very spirit forward expression, meaning it has 92 proof, but it does not taste 92 whatsoever. You get those lovely wax, grass, vegetal notes from Kleinleash, but you also get that vibrant citrus and fruit from Linkwood. And then it also has a little bit of our Island Malt blend, which rounds it and gives it that very Scotch whiskey, like Japanese style Scotch whiskey profile. And on the back palate, which is brilliant, John added about less than 2% of Kalia, which is a smoky distillery whiskey from the island of Ireland. So this is a very Sauvignon Blanc meets Japanese style citrus, grass, wax, vegetal, apple, orchard, pineapple-y, with a kiss of smoke on the back palate that kind of draws you back for another sip. This whiskey is doing extremely well with us. On the on-trade is having a field day with it. This is probably the whiskey I bring when my wife and I go out to house parties. And guys, girls of all ages, I'll make a highball, like a Scotch spritz, this with like some sort of lemon lime club soda, maybe a bar spoon of simple, just to sweeten it up a little bit. It tastes like a liquid freaking Fresca. It is absolutely delicious. And it's also great on its own, but it's also great in any sort of application you want to drink it, from a classic paper plane, old fashioned, to like a penicillin, or if you want to get creative. I was at a restaurant in Providence last night. They made this with Campari, a shrub, a little bit of citrus, and honeydew bitters, and it was lights out. Great.
I think the graphic is spot on in terms of what I'm picking up on the nose and on the palate. Like the pears is the first thing that hit me, and then the green apples.
Yep.
But the orchard I think is a very apropos name for it.
Yeah. And this, I was playing with this the other day, and I made this with ounce and a half this with some spiced apple cider and a little bit of citrus, a little bit of lemon. It was spectacular. It was so fall forward and lovely and not too sweet, not overpowering. Because that ABV, that high ABV, really, you don't get, the spirit doesn't get lost, which is what you want. Any questions on Orchard?
No, but people are commenting in the chat. I'm reading over. Jack says, somebody said licorice, and Jack agrees. And he also says he likes the smoke finish, and he doesn't typically like the smoke.
Yeah.
So
I wouldn't throw this in the PD smoky class. I would put this in the non, but I would put this in a non with an asterisk, because yeah, there is that hint, that kiss of peat and smoke, but it's not something. It's more smoke for sure, and it's not going to overpower your profile.
And it's interesting. It's only 3 percentage points higher in ABV, but I do feel a finish on this one versus Hedonism, where it was almost non-existent for me. But okay.
No, this has a much longer spirit vibe
I was gonna say that it's got a little bit more finish than the Hedonism. So
yeah.
And also that peaty, that smokiness helps the finish too. Helps carry it, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I asked my wife to taste it, and she does not do peat, and she enjoyed it.
That's awesome. That's what it's all about. John wanted to make something that was approachable, men, women, old, young, new whiskey drinkers, legend whiskey drinkers. Let's make something that checks the box on a little bit of everybody. So now we are going to venture into the story of the Spaniard. So now we're going to pop open this box, and this box is our malt collection box, and this is going to have the Spaniard, Spice Tree, and Peat Monster. So if you want to pour all those out just to get those aromatics going, or if you want to do one by one, by all means, you're welcome to. But those are going to be the last three before we get into the barrel pick. So we're going to start with Story of the Spaniard. This is a cool story. And with all our whiskeys, they all have heritage, authenticity, and a story. So the Spaniard was born in 2019. There was a great whiskey bar that opened up in the West Village of Manhattan called the Spaniard. And the owners of this whiskey bar were a bunch of young, UK Scots. There was a few Scots. There was an Irish guy. And they just loved whiskey. And they loved Compass Box. And they put us on their menu. They put Artist Blend and Peat Monster on their penicillin. And they were crushing it. And John's like, who are these guys? I got to meet them. So John came and met them. And they were commiserating, and they were just geeking out in the corner of the bar, grabbing all sorts of whiskeys. And I'm like, what are you guys doing? And they're like, John's like, I'm making them a whiskey. And he was so excited. I'm like, what do you mean you're making them a whiskey? This is when we really didn't do bespoke whiskeys in the US. We did them more in UK. He's like, well, I've always wanted to make a heavily sherried, red wine cask finished blended malt, but I was afraid to do it because we're a small company and I can't invest that money because it would crush us if it didn't work out well. These guys gave John literally a blank check and said, make your project. We will fund it. And no matter how it comes out, it's paid for. And if it's great, it's great. If it's a dud, it's a dud. So John made a 65 case run of the Spaniard in 2019 that was spectacular. It's a collection of malt whiskeys from around. And what John wanted to do was he wanted to heavily age it in Oloroso sherry and red wine casks. I can't remember what the red wine casks that he originally used. Maybe it was Rioja, maybe it was Tempranillo. I cannot remember. But it was wonderful. And those bottles, if you can find them, are on the open market for $1,500, $2,000. So John had a winner. So John scaled back the age of the whiskeys, refined the whiskey making, and made the Spaniard, launched it in September of 2019. So this is 4 single malt whiskeys that are heavily aged in Oloroso sherry and Tempranillo red wine casks. So this is going to be a very full-bodied red wine lover Scotch whiskey. Think Macallan, think Dalmore, had Naughty Sex. There's a little bit of both in them. You get cherry, you get chocolate from the Tempranillo, you get that lovely rustic, that subtle spice, that raisin from the sherry, and it just all blends lovely together. Much fuller body, nice finish, and we're thrilled to have it. I love mixology. I bartended in college. I love craft cocktails. I love a black Manhattan with this. This and Amaro is spectacular. After 4 minutes after we're done with the Zoom, I'm pouring a 50-50 Spaniard, Amaro, 2 dashes of chocolate bitters, stir, orange zest, and I am thrilled. There you go.
I love black Manhattans too.
I've
got all those ingredients right here in my that's great.
I don't know what that is. What is black Manhattan?
Yeah, can someone tell me what a black Manhattan is?
It's a regular Manhattan, but it's with Amaro instead of sweet Vermouth.
Yeah.
It's great. And I just do a 50-50. I've customized it. 50% Spaniard, 50% Amaro. I like chocolate bitters, a couple dashes of chocolate bitters, 30 rotations, pour it on a nice ice rock, a zest of orange. Oh, good Lord.
Dude, that sounds amazing.
I gotta try it out now. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It's so good.
It's dangerous. I go through a bottle of Averna literally way too often.
I'm glad you record this because I can remember that now.
Yeah.
You ever put black cherry bitters with a black Manhattan too? Or
you could. Yeah, you could.
Or
You
walnut,
can also
walnut bitters too. Walnut bitters with a black Manhattan is really
walnut. It's very user friendly, and you can also throw maraschino cherry in there if you want. I mean, it's all good.
Gotta have that.
Yeah. So, what questions on the Spaniard? You guys, now we're branching out to more of the single malt, heavier, fuller distilleries, bigger, bolder. This is Glenmoray. This is Strathmill. This is Deanston. This is our Highland Malt Blend. This is Glendullen. It's full, bigger body notes that sherry and red wine really shine through. And keep in mind, it also touches a little bit of French oak and recharred bourbon cask. So it has everything.
It's like that oily finish in your mouth. It's like, and it's the sherry, it's the sweetness. It's nice.
It is. It's really lovely.
What's on the label? Is that a mushroom? What is that?
No, that's a gentleman with a big fedora and a beard. It's a poet. Yeah. And it was funny when we joke, and the guy in the window to the right, we cut John Glazer's face, and we superimposed his face on that image. We wanted him to do that. It would be a nice little Easter egg, but he said no. I thought that would be hysterical. Yeah. All right.
So does that bar get any royalties from this version of Spaniard or no?
No, that bar got the distinction to have a whiskey be made by John Glazer, which is far and few between in the US. All right. So next, guys, we are going to do Spice Tree. And Spice Tree is our illegal whiskey. What do I mean by that? So John won an innovative award for this. Back in 2007, John had this idea that he wanted to really reinforce the whiskeys that are in this, which is Clynelish, Dalwhinnie, and Teaneck. And he was the first to take an American barrel with French oak staves and mounted the inside of the American barrel with French oak staves. And those French oak, he did a heavy char to them. So what you got was a collection of the creamy and oak from the American, the spicy from the French, and that heavy charred gave it a really full rye whiskey kind of body to it. The Scotch Whisky Association said, pump the brakes, Mr. Glazer. That's illegal. You're adding a fourth component. You can't put anything in a barrel. So he settled on American barrel with French oak heads and tails, and a heavy char to the French oak heads and tails. So that's what he settled on. Makers love that idea. Makers 46 backbone is the stave process, which John created. So Spice Tree, I'm still on the hunt for that first batch of Spice Tree that was in the illegal whiskeys. It's like a unicorn. If you can get a bottle of that, holy mackerel, but haven't been able to find one. The Spice Tree I love because I'm a big, bold flavor guy. I put hot sauce on a lot of my food. I just like flavor. So this to me, and keep in mind, all the whiskeys we're trying has an American connotation or an American gateway to bring in the Americans over to Scotch whiskey. Bourbon for Hedonism, red wine for Spaniard, artist blend, very creamy and ex-bourbon. Orchard House, Sauvignon Blanc, Japanese. This is rye whiskey. This, you close your eyes, you drink this, you're thinking you drinking a rye whiskey style Scotch whiskey. Think Macallan and Rittenhouse Rye had an arm wrestle or a love child, and this is the result of it. You get those bold cedar, cloves, citrus, nutmeggy, bake spice, raisin, 92 proof, 846 ABV. I love drinking this on a by itself with a little bit of water with a craft beer, like a double IPA or a pale ale or something that's a full-bodied beer. It goes so well. Plus, it's pretty badass in a cocktail. Think Manhattan, think old fashioned, think riff on a paper plane. It's really delicious. So Spice Tree, our rye whiskey style Scotch whiskey.
Wow.
I mean, that is the first thing that I was thinking about, rye, as I was tasting it.
Yep.
It's totally has a rye profile.
Yep. Big time. Questions on Spice Tree?
It makes me crave a rye.
I know. So we're almost there, folks. We got Peat Monster, then we got the barrel.
Before, hold on. I do want to make it very clear that people are digging this one specifically. There
Awesome.
are very interesting comments in the chat. Wow, all capitals. So
Great. All right. This is
We're getting to the
our-
wild card now.
Yes, this is our #1 seller globally, whether it be New York, California, Florida, Australia, Italy, Singapore. Peat Monster is our #1 seller. And it's interesting because Peat Monster is our big, bold, heavy peaty, smoky whiskey. That's that 10%er. Remember? 10% of all Scotch whiskey is peaty, smoky. Well, it just so happens that this one is our most noted. For many years, we were known as the Peat Monster Company and not Compass Box. I would say yes. Have you ever heard of Compass Box? No. What do you make? Oh, Spice Tree, Spaniard, Peat Monster. Peat Monster. Yeah, I know Peat Monster. It's like, okay. So Peat Monster is special because it's the first whiskey to really kind of announce what you're going to get. You're going to get something peaty. Monster tends to be big and scary. So you're going to get big, scary, peaty, smoky, maybe whiskeys. So there's not much room for error. Peat Monster is 10-year-old Lefroy and 13-year-old Kalia, two lovely whiskeys from Islay that really play well together. That lovely, peaty, smoky, medicinal, I call it a hospital on fire. You get that Band-Aid, iodine, medicinal, you get that peat bog, you get that campfire smoke. But I promise you, it's going to get all that in your nose, but when you drink it, it's going to be super creamy and citrusy. It's really bizarre. And that's done because of the ex-Buffalo Trace cask finishing that Peat Monster gets. It really doesn't stay with you in a negative way. Typically, big, bold, peaty Scotch whiskeys like Octomore or Lagavulin or Ardbegs, you're chewing on for hours, if not the next day. You're burping it up. You're like, woof, goodness. This 24 phenol, which is not super, super high. You get what you need to get, and then it kind of dissipates, creamy, citrusy, and lovely. This makes a spectacular old fashioned. It's a great topper on a penicillin. It's a wonderful Bloody Mary variation. I love Bloody Marys. It doesn't get lost. You get that lovely smoky finish component on it. And there's a drink out there called the penicillin. The penicillin is blended Scotch whiskey, honey ginger syrup, lemon, and topped with a peated float. The original penicillin that Sam Ross created in Milk and Honey, a cocktail bar in 2005, was made with Compass Box Whiskies. It was made with Asila, a whiskey we had to retire, but John created Artist Blend to substitute, and Peat Monster as the float. So that's our authenticity and heritage and feather in our cap. We are the original penicillin, which is a very, very popular Scotch whiskey drink.
Oh, I was like, right now, I'm wondering why I've never had a penicillin before.
It is a great drink. Have it next time you go to your cocktail bar that you trust and you know does a great job. And ask for a penicillin with Compass Box. They'll probably make it with Monkey Shoulder or some sort of Diageo or big brand. But on occasion, if you go to a hardcore and they have Compass Box, they'll make it with Artist Blend or Glasgow Blend because Lefroy's in it. And that's the original OG. But Peat Monster also goes lovely with oysters. It goes great with stinky cheeses. It is a fantastic expression to eat food with, to celebrate with Sunday Fun Day, brunches, bloodies, and it's also great Saturday night drinking meat, rocks, old-fashioned riff, you name it. It's a
You said a catchphrase there, great with stinky cheeses, and I can't get past how horrible that sounds.
It's
yeah.
See, I would disagree with that, I kind of knew this is going to be an oddball. I knew this is going to be very polarizing for sure, and so you either like it or you hate it. Chris, speaking about not liking it, like I would want to try this with a cigar, and I because it has such a bold profile that it could definitely stand up to a good cigar. So this is what I'm going to be doing after this call.
So cigar, highly recommend cigar. A nice Peat Monster whiskey glass. It's fantastic.
A non-Scotch guy, I mean, the flavor, the smoke came at the end, so that was surprising. But still, it's like it's there, and it's just
It's iodine, right? That's the first thing you kind of like see and taste. Yeah.
It
Curacrum.
covers everything. I mean, it's like the flavors were there right at the beginning in my mouth, and then all of a sudden it was like a wash, like a wave coming in of smoke, and that's where I lose it.
That's awesome.
Well, that's fair. I could totally see how like a bourbon drinker, primarily bourbon drinker, wouldn't like it. But as I said, this is very much an acquired taste, and not selling you on this one particularly, but I bet. I guess it depends on how long you've been drinking whiskey. We have people here who've been drinking whiskey all their lives, and so their palates is pretty much set and not really going to change. But there are other people that are more what's the word I'm looking for? Adventurous. And for them, this is an acquired taste. Like I don't know anyone who tastes this as their first, like, adventure into whiskey and likes it. It's just not going to happen that way.
Not going to happen. Nope.
Yeah.
Hey, and I'll throw in there, if you add, like, to make it more approachable, like we were in Scotland a few years ago, and I'm not big on peat, but we had smoked mussels when we were on Islay, and adding that brininess with the mussels, it makes it extremely approachable, and now it's really enjoyable.
If you can find a way to associate it to your palate, even if you're not open to that profile, but you can find a path through smoky oysters and then find a peat monster with smoky oysters, and it works, then you're on your way. Then you're like, all right, I can figure it out. But if you're just hitting peat monster after you're cutting the grass, no, probably not going to work. I mean, you gotta find the right time. And that's why Peat Monster, I think, is so successful for us, because the name tells you what you're going to get. You're not going to be drinking Peat Monster if you you're going out with some buddies and you're drinking Guinness or something. It's not going to be something that you might be more inclined to like do a spice tree or a hedonism or an orchard. Peat Monster, you're probably going to get something that's peaty and smoky. So
I hadn't thought of it, but now that you're saying mixing it as an old fashioned, I'm going to do that. I saved half of it.
And you know what, Ken? Good. Compare it to a smoky old fashioned, like a proper old fashioned.
Exactly. That's what I was thinking of. Right. It's like doing the smoky old fashioned.
That's right.
Yeah. It's
awesome. I was going to say, in response to Mike, who in the chat earlier said he preferred the Peat Monster to the Lafroig 10. I feel like this one's easier to separate that sort of medicinal nose from the sweetness that you get, if you can manage to separate the nose from the palate.
It's not nearly as bad as Lafroig 10 or
this one's easier to do that. I feel like.
I'll give him credit on that. It's much more palatable.
Yeah, I mean, I like Lafroig 10. I'm the guy who put that in the comment, but I like Lafroig 10. Don't get me wrong, but the Peat Monster just seemed a little bit more palatable, like just a little more enjoyable. Like sometimes I'll have a Lafroig 10, at a bar or whatever, and then I'll be like, oh, maybe I wasn't in the mood for this, but this is like, I can always be in the mood for this,
Yeah. Well, that's a perfect example of Lafroig 10 is probably the number one selling single malt peated whiskey out in the world, but it's very one dimensional. You're going to get what you're going to get. Once again, we're being the painter that has the rainbow of colors. We're taking and we're making it a little bit different by our blending and our cask finishing. So we're kind of reinventing the Scotch whiskey profile.
Mark, I did ask that question. I don't remember what you actually answered. Your biggest market, just in terms of sales, is it US or is it outside of US?
France, number 1. California, number 2. New York, number 3. Texas, number 4.
Wow. I wouldn't pick France for number 1.
France, they crush whiskey. Crush it. And Maison de Whiskey, our distributor, if you will, they're a powerhouse. Yeah.
Did you break it down in Texas? Is it Paris, Texas? I was just curious.
You know what?
I like barbecue there, so there's they like smoke. Right?
Texas has come a long way. Texas is number 4 recently. I mean, it leapfrogged a couple other markets in the last year or two. Here's our course. We call this our core 7. This is our core 7. They're available everywhere at your favorite retail shops. Obviously, hopefully Michael's in New York or across country. Everything is available, as well as these gift sets we do sell. So Michael can get you these as well if you need any holiday gifts, stocking
yeah.
stuffers. They make great gifts for the holidays.
I love this.
Our two busiest times of the year, you guessed it, OND, October, November, December, and guess, May, June, Father's Day. Those are our bread and butter. And we're, yeah, like I said, we're growing, and we're trying to recruit and expand our presence year over year, and we're doing a great job on it. So now that you've done this, and a lot of you probably have never had us on the radar, like anything in life, a new trend, a fad, a car, anything out there that you first see, you're like, oh, I like that, and you research it or you Google it, it's going to start popping up in your purview and your world, man. So now I guarantee you, you're going to be on Instagram later, and you're going to be closed, before you go to bed, and you're going to be like, oh my God, Compass Box? It's going to pop up. I mean, it's going to start tracking you and getting to you now that it's on your purview.
A friend of mine from Phoenix, Patrick Cohn, he's a big Compass Box guy. He's going to give me a big "I told you so."
Yep. Yeah. That's it. All we need is this. I just need an hour with everybody in the world, and we'll become a different company. That's all I need, man. And I'm not expecting people to fall in love with every expression, but I know there's one out there that is for you.
Mark, do you ever deal with Lagavulin in your blends?
We have not. We get typically the peat whiskeys that we do mostly with are Ardbeg. Sorry, Ardbeg,
Yeah.
Bolmar, Lafroig, Talisker, Kalia. Those are typically our peated components. On occasion, we'll get like a Highland Park peated, which is unusual because it's on the mainland. But those are typically our peated sources.
Okay. So I like Lagavulin. I know for some reason it's a kind of peated that is just different to me. It just hits right on my palate. First time a friend of mine turned me on to that, I was like, wow, this is really good. Like, Lafroig takes a little time, but Lagavulin, I guess maybe because I was already used to peated, but I just loved it as soon as the first time I had it, something, I don't know what it is about it, but it's really, to me, it's really good.
So two things. Again, I'm reading some of the conversation that goes on in chat, and Ross says the Orchard House is so far from my typical Scotch profile, but it's delicious. That's a must pick up, and that speaks to exactly what you just said, right? There's going to be one for you, and if you can have these conversations with more people, you're going to turn them into fans. Speaking about special releases, I know you also have so you have these bespoke, bottles that go for like uber money. And then you have these core lineup that is very approachable. I think what are we talking about? Like 50, 60 bucks, I think. I mean, I think it's actually went up in price a little bit, but it's still very approachable. But you also have like the one just recently came out, Metropolis. Can you talk about those for a little bit?
Yeah. Part of our limited edition run, which are the one and dones. A couple times a year, John does limited editions, and Metropolis is the latest limited edition. And Metropolis is part of the Extinct Blend Quartet. So last year, John launched his Extinct Blend Quartet. In short, he wanted to create a series of 4 blended Scotch whiskeys of decades ago, back when blended Scotch whiskeys was king, before single malt was crazed. So the first one he launched in September of 22 is called Ultramarine. And Ultramarine is an ode on Johnny Walker Blue, which John was part of the committee that created Johnny Blue. The second one is called Delos, and that was launched in February of 23. And that was a kind of to pay homage to a whiskey that he had to retire, a Sila, which was the first whiskey that Sam Ross created to make the penicillin. He just kind of used a lot older age and stocks of whiskey. That was to celebrate a Sila. Which was John's kind of Japanese style whiskey back before that was the thing. And then the third installment is Metropolis. And Metropolis, the whole philosophy of Metropolis is to pay homage to the blended Scotch whiskey making history, the old ways of making blended Scotch whiskey with the people behind it, the metropolis of Edinburgh, of Glasgow, how blended Scotch whiskey was such an important part of the heritage of Scotland. And for this expression, he's using lovely 27, 28-year-old to 31-year-old whiskeys. Like the peated component on this is Bourbon. The grain component on this is Port Dundas, which is 31 years old. There's some Mittelduff in this, some Glen Elgin, some Abelauer in this. It's just really lovely. It's also 49 ABV, so it has a higher proof. And the mouthfeel, because of the late 20s age and early 30s, is very viscous. It coats your palate immediately. It's weighted, heavy, long finish, creamy, slight smoke. It's spectacular. But these go for a little higher. The retail on this national average is probably around 3.25, whereas the core ranges are a lot lower. Hedonism is 129-ish. The malt collection, Spice Tree, Spaniard, Peat Monster, all around 65, 75. Orchard House, 55. And then Artisan Glasgow blend, late 30s, like 38, 30, 37, 38 years old, dollars, excuse me. So everything is really approachable from a price perspective. But our limiteds tend to be a lot higher because of the quality and the age. And keep in mind the scarcity. I think we only had 370 cases, 6-packs of this come from the US.
What's the ages of those in that one?
Off the top of my head, I think late 20s, like 26 to 31 years old. I'd have to go back and look, but
What's the ABV on that one? I'm sorry,
say it again.
What's the ABV on that one?
4.9.
4.9. Okay.
Let me double check that. Yeah, 4.9.
Sounds great.
It's delicious. These are always crowd pleasers, and they're collector's items. They're beautiful. They're special occasion. They're just spectacular. They're really lovely. And the barrel picks, we call them the Marion casks, which we'll segue into now. So, want me to talk about those, Michael?
Yeah, I was just going to. Yeah, go ahead.
So the two samples of the Marion casks. So the Marion casks, there was so much requests for bespokes, but a bespoke project like what we did for the Spaniard, like what we did for Burn Steakhouse in Tampa, Florida, like what we did for Julio's in Mass and Astor, New York, Rivals, K&L in San Francisco. It's so time consuming and challenging and difficult because you have to fly them over. The collaboration is just a lot. So John doesn't do them often. So we had so many requests for it. So John settled on creating a Marion cask program, and we're in our 4th year, I believe. And we're taking the base Glasgow and artist blend. So we're taking these guys, which are normally, like I said, 9, 10, 11, 12-year-old grain and malt whiskey. We're taking those blends and we're aging them for an extra, we're marrying them for an extra 11 months to 2 years, depending on the cask. And we're upping the ABV from 43 to 49. So the Marion cask samples that you have, the two, there's one that's an artist blend Marion cask and a Glasgow blend Marion cask. They are all the ingredients that are in normal artist and Glasgow blend, but they're an extra 15 months to 2 years old. We've upped the ABV to 49. So they're older and they're higher proof. And you can pick the cask finish. So the two you have, the artist blend, cask number 168, that is a collection of the artist blend liquid up to 49 and aged an additional, I think, 15 months in American oak barrel. The American oak barrel is either going to be a Buffalo Trace, Elijah Craig, or Angel's Envy. Sadly, we don't know. On occasion, we'll know. It'll be marked Buffalo. It'll be marked Elijah. It'll be marked. But this one we don't. So we just know it's one of those three. And the barrel that held Linkwood is what everything is aging for that extra 15 months in. So the Linkwood distillery juice, once it was emptied and put into artist blend, we put all 4 components back into the linkwood barrel and aged it an extra 15 months. So it's extra aging in linkwood, which linkwood gives off more citrus and fruit, and it's higher ABV. So if you had a normal artist blend with you and you tried that side by side, it would be day and night. The Marion cask would be much bigger. Obviously, the ABV impacts that, but it has a little more profile, a little more flavor because of the actual aging and the specialized linkwood bourbon, ex-bourbon cask finish.
So to me, they're a bit more, how do I say this? Flavorful, I guess. No, I mean that's probably not the right way to say it.
They're
just more fuller
body.
Yeah. I know, like, so let me set the table for this. If it was up to me, in terms of if I had my way, I would definitely pick one of these two and go with it. Unfortunately, we need people to have appetite for these, right? Like I won't be able to drink a full barrel worth of this stuff. So this is why we included these 2 samples in the set, because we're going to use today's audience as almost like a focus group to see whether or not you guys like either one of them. And then the second question would be, like it enough to actually make it a selection of the prime barrel. So give it a taste. Let's have a short discussion now in terms of like, what are you guys thinking about it? And in terms of whether or not we want to make a selection out of these. And then, as it becomes customary at this point, I will send out a link where you guys get to rank every single selection that we tasted on today. And then I'll share that with the group as well. Who wants to start us off on these 2 specific samples?
I'm going to say, first of all, the artist before, okay, the Glasgow blend has a little bit of peat in it, okay, which is great. I love it, but I think judging by most people that are in the group, prime barrel group, if they're not used to peated, that might turn them off right away. Even though I think this is amazing, I love it, but the artist blend might be a little bit more palatable for the group as a whole.
Yeah.
So Mike, I go ahead.
Let me talk about the artist blend one, the other cask. The Glasgow blend one, the other cask, because you guys have 2 casks, right? A single barrel artist and a single barrel Glasgow, right? So the Glasgow blend single Marion cask, that is same concept, but it is with the Glasgow blend juice. But the difference is it's 49 ABV, and we're aging it for an additional 15 months. I believe this one is aged for an additional, around 15, 18 months. I have to look back on the start and the finish because I have the start date. I don't have the finish date. So this one, let's call it 15 or 18 months in Cameron Bridge barrels. So the grain barrels that Hedonism is aged in is what all of this is aged in it. But it does have the Lafroig in it, so it will have peaty, smoky. But the peat and smoke, if you taste your Glasgow barrel pick side by side to your original Glasgow, it's going to be much different because the ABV, the extra aging, and it's going to be a little bit more creamier only because it spends that extra time in the Hedonism, which is a bourbon-esque, bourbon-friendly barrel. I don't know if you guys get that, but you should.
Definitely.
But it still has peat. It will have peat. So if you're not a peated guy or girl, then the artist blend barrel pick would be more to your inclination because that's going to be more creamier, fruity, citrusy, but on a higher ABV level.
So I personally totally agree with Mike just said. I think the artist blend is a safer choice because I think it will appeal to more palates.
Yeah.
But to me personally, Glasgow is a much more interesting whiskey.
Yeah, it's more complex. It's great.
It's more complex.
Yeah.
So, but that's me. If you don't like peat, I can see how you wouldn't enjoy it, even though the peat component of it is nowhere near what we tasted in Peat Monster, right? It's not overpowering. It just gives that extra wrinkle. That's what makes it special to me. It's just different.
Yeah, I'll throw in there, the artist blend's really good and is approachable and has that like kind of American whiskey bite on the front end, if that makes some sense.
Yep.
But the Glasgow blend is better. It's just better.
It's really, really great. I think it's approachable, and it's definitely, oh, that peat in there is just perfect. I really, really like the Glasgow blend.
Stephen, I want to put you on the spot for a second. I beg you to, because you guys were with us in Colorado. Chris, you were there too, right? Yeah. So we had a chance to taste a peated whiskey. I know peat is, like I said, it's very controversial in this group, but we had a chance to taste a peated Scotch that is being made in Colorado, and it was amazing. It was great. So not all peats are created equal. I say this, and I'd love to hear what Stephen and Becca think about this one, because they go for a lot of whiskey themselves. So what are your thoughts on this one?
So I mean, both of us, well, we started out in Scotch, so we're kind of in the same place you were. We started out in Scotch and then came to other things. The very first whiskey I ever tried was a Lafroig, and I loved it. So I mean, I tend to like the peat. I think I agree with Stephen, what he said in the comments, that the artist blend sort of starts out good on the palate, but drops off pretty quickly. It didn't have as much depth for me. I thought the Glasgow had a lot more depth. What I really would love to see is a higher ABV orchard house. That's what I would like.
Or higher than 92, really.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Or, Spice Tree.
I'm with you.
Too.
But yeah, I personally liked the Glasgow a lot. I thought it had a lot, just more depth to it. I liked the amount of peat, but I think for a lot of bourbon and rye drinkers, if they don't like peat, they're not going to like it.
Yeah.
And we had people in this little group say they didn't care for the peat, so, times that by all the people in the Prime Barrel group. And I agree with everybody that said, the Glasgow blend is amazing. I'd probably buy the Glasgow blend over the artist blend. That's just me. But I'm just thinking of the bigger picture. That's all, And so if like we can buy both, that'd be great. But, if it's one or the other, I mean, that's your call, Michael,
Yeah, this is where enthusiasts in me and someone who has to kind of count dollars and cents, compete against one another. I'm with you. I would prefer the Glasgow over artist. And there's nothing wrong with artists. Like I would enjoy artists as well. Yeah, but if I had to pick between the two, Glasgow would be my choice. Anyway,
I want to throw out there too, like women account for buying whiskey as well. And both of the women that are sitting here tonight have both voted for Peat.
All right.
Yeah, but my girlfriend does not like peat, and she was sitting here a minute ago, and I'm like having her smell all the stuff. She's like, But I sit there with Lafroig 10, and she's like, oh my God, please no, at the restaurant or something. Like she doesn't even want to smell it. But so not all women love peat, so I'm just throwing that out there.
Let's do this. I mean, Mark and I will reconvene probably sometime next week to talk about this. But for now, let's fill out that survey, because a couple of questions on that survey is about this particular pick, whether or not you guys think it should happen or not, and if it should happen, then which one of these two you gravitate towards. So take a couple of minutes. It's only a couple of minutes. I'll wait, and then I'll share the results right online so we can all see. Go there and check that out.
I will say too that one from Mile High was a peated American single malt, right? But it was 141 or 140.
That's the one I'm referring to.
Yeah. And you know me, I can't stand peat, right? I don't like drinking liquid Band-Aids. I don't understand why anybody cares for that, but to each their own, right? And I started out with Irish whiskey and I started out with Scotch. And then, I got lucky and met a guy named Dave, and he turned me on to rye. And, that was years ago. And it just gravitated towards there. But occasionally when you can find something that's smoky, and I do like smoky things, but I separate peat and smoky. To me, they're not the same. And so even though I will say this about the Glasgow, even though it is slightly peated, it's more smoky to me and not peated. So I would actually drink that. I wouldn't buy it, but I would actually drink it if somebody poured it to me.
Okay. What about the one we tasted in Colorado? What do you think about that one?
I still want it.
Okay.
Yeah, I really do.
All right. That's a conversation for a different day, but that's good to know.
Yeah. I have friends in Scotland that are always trying to get me into the peated side, but and I would love to have that here when they come out.
All right, Mark. So for your benefit, because guys online already know this, we use a scale of 0 to 10 to rank anything that we taste, and this is pretty much the same scale that we use to select single barrels. So on a scale 0 to 10, 5 being an average, anything under 5 you probably wouldn't want to have or to drink, and then anything over 5 you do like to various degrees on how much you actually do like it, right? So let's go one by one. So the first thing we tried was a Glasgow blend, and it's gotten an average rating of 5.8. It's right in the middle, right? People didn't necessarily hate it, but it was just okay for most folks, which is not surprising, honestly, because it does introduce that hint of peat, which is, as we've discussed, is an acquired taste. Moving on to your birthday expression, hedonism, that scored a lot higher, 7.4. And again, for your benefit, we hardly ever rank anything, or at least I hardly ever rank anything above 8. Like, it has to be outstanding to be above 8. I think out of everything that we've done so far, only a handful of barrels scored that high. So if it's a 7, normally it becomes a barrel pick. Normally. So like 7.4 is actually a very respectable score. And as you can tell by the distribution, somebody actually scored it the perfect 10. Actually, 2 people scored it the perfect 10. So people do like it. Yep. There were the voting was skewed towards the right hand side, which is where you want to be.
Yep.
Orchard fruit.
To no one's surprise, also fared even better, actually, 7.5. So, and just judging by the comments and judging by what people have shared online and on the call, this is probably one of the favorites of tonight's lineup. Spaniard, 7.2. Anything above 7 is great. So 7.2 is a good score, and I'll repeat it. You have to keep in mind that the group that we have here is not predominantly Scotch drinkers. So for them to score a Scotch whiskey that high says something. So that's very encouraging to hear and see. Spice Tree, we talked about how it's reminiscent of like a rye whiskey profile, and we have a lot of rye whiskey fans in the group. Also did well. Didn't get a 10, but had a few 8s and 9s, which is great. Peat Monster, to no one's surprise, is right in the middle. Like I said, it's you'll love it or you hate it, and I'm not surprised by it. What I am surprised is that some people, 5 people actually scored at 6, which is above 5, which is above average. So that's awesome. And then the moment of truth, right? So there was a question here about what do you guys think about Glasgow blend, marrying cask, and artist? Judging by this, it's pretty equal, with an artist blend actually getting a bit of a higher score. Somebody voted 4 on Glasgow, which kind of skewed things down a bit, but that's interesting. I don't want to put anybody on a spot about 4, so I'm not going to do that. And then there was a couple of questions here at the end. Should we consider marrying cask as a club? More than 75% said yes. Now, there are only 15 people voting, right? So take that into consideration. But we're going to use this recording with the broader group and basically have the same survey be filled out by them and see how the cookie crumbles. But in terms of which one, it's almost split down the middle. Like, people like either one of them, which to me, you could interpret it one of 2 ways. Either there isn't a clear winner, or both are equally great and people would be equally pleased with one. But there is I guess a smidge of a preference to a Glasgow blend, which is, again, if I had to guess and if I had to be a tiebreaker, I would probably go with the Glasgow as well, just because it's just more interesting and developed whiskey for my taste. And then there were a few notes. Tough call for what would see in a group. It would be Glasgow, right? I agree with that. Okay. Any finishing thoughts, ideas, comments to myself, to Mark? What you guys think about this tasting? Because this
Mark.
is the departure.
I have a question. So is there anything in the pipeline that's higher proof? You know, coming from a bourbon and rye drinker, right? Most Scotch for me just falls flat. This included, right? Just kind of that tapers off the end. There's not much of a finish, right? And I heard you made a comment about 92. Yeah, we're, 110 to 125.
Yeah, no, and sadly, the only cask strength whiskey we've had in the last couple of years is Peat Monster cask strength, and that was launched in April of this last year. But it's a Peat Monster base, and that was 56.7. That's as high as we go. Yeah, but nothing in the near future. What's that?
I mean, that's high enough.
It's high and it's delicious, but it's Peat Monster. It's just that it's the 20th anniversary of Peat Monster. Peat Monster was launched in 2003. April was the 20th anniversary, so we celebrated with a cask strength.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So Mark, let's reconvene next week, early next week. We'll chat about, the tasting, the survey, and what we're going to do next. And then I'll share this recording with a larger group and we see how they respond to it.
Okay.
I wish they had a chance to try some of this stuff, but like just doing it off of our notes and the video is going to be probably challenging for some people. But I hope they keep an open mind about this. So, guys, as always, I thank you for taking time. I hope we're going to keep bringing you these types of tastings moving forward. I always look for something off the beaten path, so to speak. I mean, it's nice to have, the staples, the bourbons and ryes for the most part, but every once in a while, like I'd like to venture out and take a left turn. And this is definitely qualifies, but I think it's been a great education, especially if this is your first kind of like introduction into this world. And now that you know what each one tastes like, the good thing is every single one of these expressions is widely available in your local shops. If you can find it or are lazy enough to go, our site carries all of them. So that could be an opportunity there for you as well. But we're going to keep doing this. Thank you, Mark, for your time as well, especially taking time on a Saturday and providing these kits for us. I appreciate it. That being said, any last words?
I really appreciate you guys giving me your hour and a half, hour and 40. It's been a pleasure. Michael has really kind of opened my eyes to it. I mean, he and I went back and forth, and I'm glad I did it. So I got whiskey and a lot of lips, and hopefully we can all, I can confidently say I grew our tribe by 30 plus people tonight. So thank you.